Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. This is a pre-recorded episode, so apologize for those. Tommy has a meeting scheduled on a Tuesday, and he will be in and traveling around the world. So we
I
had to
guess if
record one.
Boston is the world, so
It's it's not our little Milwaukee area, Chicago area here. So
for the rest of you, happy Tuesday, and maybe that's the indicator of a pre-recorded session versus a live, right? You get a dulcet, quiet tone.
Happy Tuesday.
I don't know. I hear where you get some.
Happy Tuesday.
You're gonna disappoint some people.
Tuesday.
Well,
I hope Chris Wagner can snip that one for us and put it on the internet somewhere. That'd be great. Excellent.
Funny.
We don't have a whole bunch of openers this time or intros. We talked a lot about Ignite last time. We're going to let that kind of conversation go. We'll probably revisit Data Marts in another couple months from our last episode. But we do have
45 minutes of intros wasn't enough.
Exactly. It was like 45 minutes of intros and 50 minutes of actual talking, which was fun. We do have an event coming up. We are very pleased to host Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari from the SQL BI team. They will be coming over to the States, and they'll be in Chicago. And we're going to have them for an Ask Me Anything live event at the Microsoft office. It will be at the Chicago Meetup URL here, and I'll try and make sure I get this in the description of the video. You can go to meetup.com/Chicagoland Power BI. That is their event. It'll be coming up here shortly. There is a limited number of seats, 45 max attendees, and it'll be at the Microsoft, I guess the Microsoft Technology Center, the MTC.
Yeah, it's the Prudential Building right north of Millennium Park. So it's
okay.
Yeah, and then
right off Millennium Park, then right near the Bean, right? That's where the Bean is.
Relatively near the
north of the Bean.
North of the Bean. Yes.
Okay.
There you go. You got it.
Got it. I know where we're at. So if you want to join, it's 45 attendees max. If we max out the number of attendees and we need to ask for more room, we need to do so quickly. So if you want to jump in on this, make sure you attend. It is a $3 registration fee because we want to make sure you're committed to coming and getting your money's worth for that full $3. Starts at 6. We'll have some food and we'll hang out, talk for a bit, and then we'll start everything around 6:30. Does that sound about right?
That is perfect. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you'd like to add, Tommy?
You have the RSVP thing again. We're not used to this. It's been a few years.
True.
But you have to RSVP on Meetup because that's going to be where the registration link is going to be.
Correct.
And we're going to send that list to Microsoft. You're going to have to go to the front office and show who you are. So bring your license too. So
yep. And there are COVID restrictions. So check out the Meetup group as well. They need to show proof of vaccine to let you inside the Microsoft office. So if you don't have something like that, check out the COVID-19 safety measures that are listed in the invite. So that's just important to know before you sign up. All right. All sales are fine. No CODs. Batteries not included. Excellent.
What you should have done is just practice that for an entire week so you could just 10x it. Right.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It was a lot longer.
All things exchange trademark. Patented by the United.
May cause nausea, diarrhea, and headaches.
Oh, jeez. That was a different direction.
Oh, yeah. There we go. That'll wake you up in the morning.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about onto the topic for today. Tommy, this topic came from someone you were talking about at a conference, and I think this is a great topic. Yes. Or a user group of thing. I don't know where you were talking about.
You were talking about somebody.
I was talking about this person. Talking with this person.
With the person, not about them.
This guy, I'll say his first name. I'm not going to leave him off the drive. His name was Josh, but he was at the Data Insights Summit. He listened to us. That was great. And he wanted to actually put a mailbag topic on there. And we're just having a conversation. He's in a lot of these situations. He's one guy at a company doing all the things. Mm-hmm. And as we were talking, it's like, how do you really, if you're good at DAX and visualizations, but all these other sessions at the conference, and another big important part of this is the adoption and the governance and being able to, really sell yourself to at the BI team and then think of whether you're going Power Platform or you're going Azure. So how do you actually get your skills out there to, I'm an expert in Power BI? That's almost an impossible statement, right? Because there's so many aspects of it. It's an iceberg effect where it's the little ice on top of the water, but then everything underneath it. So the real question is like, how do you actually scale yourself? as a BI professional.
So I think this is a really good topic here, because as you become more of a leader or more, I don't know, the centerpiece maybe for what the Power BI our group is doing, admin, you're maybe on the center of excellence, maybe you're working on building a community of practice, those kind of things. What does this look like, and how do you scale yourself? I thought this was really good. So let's jump in. Let's start off with Tommy.
Yeah.
What would be some kind of ways you would start, tackling this, scaling yourself, particularly around the Power BI ecosystem, I guess?
I think there's honestly the first thing that comes to mind is choices, where you realize that there's too many rabbit holes to go down. I honestly went through a dumb rabbit hole Thursday morning through Friday morning. And I was just trying to figure something out. But I think there's a lot of choices you want to make on who do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? Even if it's just yourself, right? And like for myself, it was Power Platform. And it was really wanting to the adoption of the Power Platform side. There are some people like yourself who the Azure side, I mean, that is what you know, right?
Mhm.
And there's the DAX people of the world, the Greg Baldinis. But for me, I was like, okay, where do I think the skills can best be served? So it was just kind of choosing to be a Power Platform, Power Apps, and on the adoption side in terms of where I really want to spend a lot of time. And then I'll start there, but I think it's having to make those choices on where do you want to focus starting off.
So I'm trying to materialize your thoughts into some kind of key bullets here that I'm thinking through in my head here. Let's call it, so I'm doing a lot of work right around now about helping companies figure out what their skill set is
Right.
inside their company, and helping them train up, school up these, what I'm calling personas, people that need to do a specific thing, right? And I think if I had to put a phrase on this, I would say it's a persona of the report builder persona, someone who's focusing on building reports and interacting with that. Then there's potentially the model build persona. And then there's the administration persona.
Right.
And then I'm thinking maybe there's something around like the adoption lead or the adoption, rah, go Power BI kind of person. I don't know how you say that. The adoption lead person.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. So I'm thinking about those kind of roles as you're saying these things.
Well, I think the big part of this is you should, when we say expert, and let's start there, right? When you say how do you scale yourself, that doesn't mean you were the best at DAX and Power Query and adoption than anyone, in the Midwest, right?
You're just better than everyone else at your company.
Yeah. Well, but it's like where does that competence level? Can you answer the questions? And I think it's more about being able to answer the questions or finding the answer quickly when you feel like you're at a good spot. And then you can really dive into more specific areas. I mean, we're all Microsoft MVPs. We've had certifications and all that, but we still Google things. It doesn't mean we have all the knowledge in the back of our heads.
We know where to look for the answers.
We know where to look for it. And there's
Yes,
the big
true.
difference there. So
Okay.
when it comes to scaling, I think it's having the resources.
So what was the context of the conversation, right? Because I'm reading some of the notes you
Yeah.
took, and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I can take this one of two ways. Was it around how, like, I'm so busy at work, like there's a million different directions and things we could do, but I'm not getting buy-in from other people, and like there's challenges related to that? Or are we talking about how do I grow my career?
There's two focus areas that the conversation really came as that we love talking about was number one, it was on that how do you, like, he wanted to get more into the adoption, what I call the soft skills of Power BI. But he's like, I don't have time for that. And then the other area was around there's other developers like DBA people, not necessarily Power BI, and he needs to learn what they're doing and wanting to cross sell or in a sense or cross share information and knowledge, but that's not possible. So how does he actually go on to like the more developer side, the stuff that is to me like that a little outside the peripheral is a Power BI, which again I think is Power Platform and Azure.
So this also sounds like you're saying you are in a position where you are maintaining a certain level of Power BI effort. And in order for you to break through that area, you've got to figure out how to scale better, scale your skills, scale what you do, to be able to create time where you could spend time working on these more developer-centric skills that they want to invest in, right?
1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll take it. I'll take a crack at this. Right. The general, I guess, thought that I have around scaling up, right, would be, to the second point, where if he's interested in database administration or the data behind the scenes that he interacts with, and wants to learn the data engineering aspects that he might not have a lot of engagement in, then focus on that, right?
Mhm.
Like, but I guess I only have, and I hear, I also saw the same thing in, like, an entrepreneur that was, um, talking about how Mark Cuban had talked to him and said, just focus on one thing, right? Like, I have one main thing that I'm typically like, okay, I'm going to focus a lot of attention towards that thing, and it gets the majority of my attention, focused learnings, skill set driving, because I learn it faster,
Mhm.
and it it fully engages me in what I want to accomplish. Like, it's that next thing, right? Does that mean I just ignore everything else that goes on with feature updates, or, like, periphery things? No, I just don't dedicate a lot of time towards those, and I also don't let them distract me. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like, in those
Sure.
periods where I'm, like, really wanting to ramp up into something, like, I think, I'm a proponent of pick one and roll with it. Like, you can't learn everything all the time.
I agree with
That
that.
yeah. No, and I think that's a great point because the initial side of me would want to argue going, well, that's impossible in what we do because you're always asked to do so much and it is such a wide range, but that's more of an excuse. And because I think you're dead on, where if you want to say you're an expert or feel very confident in your skills, right? Let's say in a more technical thing, or even if it's on the adoption side, you that's I think what we've all done. We either had a project that was forcing us to focus on one of those areas, or we devoted the time. And I think you have to just make that hard cut. We're going to say the next 3 months, like I need to learn more about DAX. Let's say that's where you want to go, right?
Well,
You're like, I
and
need to read the books, and that's when I'm going to focus trying to do more technical skills.
I would hope that, so there's two parts to the question. I want to move into something more developer centric. That's a goal I have. I want to move into, and I think Seth, you make a great point there around, just do it, spend time on it, and figure out what that is. But I think sometimes if your company system is a SQL database, where you have a SQL database, and behind that, that's where the engineering of the work is being done. SQL is a bit more of a, what I would call, a closed wall to a lot of developers that are on the business side. So there's kind of a barrier. Like, you just don't get one of those to stand them up to play with it. Now, if you really want to put your money where your mouth is, you can go turn on a SQL serverless server in Azure on your own in your own time, and they're minimal cost. It would cost you a bit to work on that, but you could invest some of your own money to go learn and control something on your own that's outside of your company, not related to your company email address. Right? You could go build your own thing, test it out, and play with it a bit there.
I wouldn't
Um,
even say that, though, right? Because if you're a company, the doors of SQL databases shouldn't be so locked down that if I had a resource on the business side that was doing report development, and I'm obviously engaging with that person, that I wouldn't have a dev environment that we would give them, some level of access to allow them to learn how to write queries, or start
I,
to learn
I
SQL
think
relations.
I think it's still pretty archaic in a lot of places with the DBAs.
I I I
So
could
you
see
think
I could see your
it's
stance on
it's
that,
locked
Seth,
up?
but I think it's going to be locked up more than you think it is. Honestly,
Yeah,
in the companies I've experienced,
Ridiculous.
they're a little bit more closed-lipped around getting that data and letting people have any access
yeah,
to databases.
yeah.
Um, in
Maybe
general,
read, but yeah, like you might be able to get read so you can do like native queries, but I mean to actually modify even a dev you're at a company.
That is
But
just, there's two parts of that, right? One is it the actual dev environment that is, what the developers and everybody's working on to go launch into the next,
probably
thing?
not.
Okay. But even then, like, okay, fine. Like, there's some guardrails you could give somebody a read. But for like, if anybody in the org was like, I really want to learn SQL, here's a database I'll spin up with you. Like, I'm giving you 1 gig. Like, you get no space.
But
You
what
get
about
nothing.
yeah, but what about the
right?
company that doesn't use Azure yet and they're still on prem with SQL?
It
Like,
doesn't matter. You can create as many databases as you want on a SQL instance.
I
What I'm
know,
saying is, what I'm saying is, like, it doesn't have to be like some massive
agreed.
like sink in an
I agree with
organization.
you.
So if anybody's listening to us that is in the IT realm, like, and people want to do it, like, give them space. Give them, like, why would you not want to teach people in your organization to skill up?
Well, I'd also echo this too. There is some. So I'm working at a college, University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there are additional SQL classes they give you where they allow you to get those SQL skills that you need. So there is like a skilling up. You know, it's for the working professional, right? It's a
Yeah.
2 or 3 weekend class. You jump in, you work with a SQL DBA. They spin you up the SQL server that you need, and you can go in and make tables and do things like that. So there is education things. What I would recommend for those kind of activities, if you're going to pair with like a school like University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, go with your manager and voice this opinion. So I think one of the strategic places I would put here for this conversation would be is make sure that your manager knows what you're interested in and what you want to start to be doing, and tie that to your goals or your plan, your training plan as you as an employee in your company. Because when you tie these realistic goals and expectations to your learning track or your goals for the year, you're adding more value to the company by becoming more knowledgeable. And
Right.
I would hope most companies will either put some money behind it to let you take an online course or get you a class or do something like, hey, I'm going to take some, even it's like, I'm thinking like Pluralsight. Hey, I want to take, 2 hours, 3 hours a month working on Pluralsight, or an hour a week, or I want to take some time during lunch, a couple days a week to do learning my own. I would hope the manager would encourage those things so that you could actually start getting the skills that you need. And then maybe the manager could plug you into projects where that would be relevant.
Well, don't forget also Azure right now has the free cluster you can get on Data Explorer. And then the Stephen McGuire wrote about how you can actually add the Contoso or Contoso database to a free cluster on Data Explorer. So there's ways to do it, but I want to take a step back because again, as we think about the BI professional here, where we're scaling up or where there's a difference, I think, where we're talking about scaling up and there's expanding the other ways. And I think we're talking about like maybe expanding your skill set, but that doesn't necessarily mean scaling up, does it?
What do you mean by scaling up?
I think scaling up is the abilities that you already have and becoming that next level.
Well, scaling yourself is different than skilling up. I would say it's different to me.
Yeah.
So scaling yourself is doing more with less of your time, right? Most of the people in the world are probably trading time for money, right? I show up, I do these, I do these things.
I had the question earlier.
Yeah, I think it was
yeah.
I show up, I do these things, and then these things take me this 8 hours per day, and I do these things repeatedly. So like, how can you take your normal workflow of stuff that you do and cut that down from, instead of being 8 hours a day, make it 6 hours, make that 4 hours. So your normal work activities are still getting accomplished, but you're doing it with more automation and more thought to, do it once and walk away, and it just runs itself. That's what you want to start building.
Well, then I think you start what you really want to do with that skill. Like if you're going to get into
this is a different question, though. So it's not skills based.
You went scale to back to skill. Can we talk about scale?
All right.
Yeah. To me, these are two different conversations. Scaling is different than scaling yourself. Yeah, it totally is, Tommy.
If there's not enough hours in a day, which there aren't, I don't care what role you're in.
Correct.
Whether you're a developer, a director, a VP, whatever, you will always have a mountain more of work than you can accomplish. And if that's what we're talking about in terms of how do I scale across these things and make a big impact, he should have, and hopefully he went to my talk at the insights. But what I'm like shifting into that, right? I think Matthew Roach, when he was talking to us, it was either him or somewhere else. I forget where I consume a lot of my information, but a lot of people talk about, like, where I heard this was emails, right? Like this giant inverted filter, right? Where you have some folks, and I think it was him, thousands of emails that just get dumped in. So there are a bunch of tools that you can use to filter out emails that are not a high priority, are just random, whatever. And they go into this thing that you check once a week, right? You can have the different rules in your email box, like just manage daily email. But I think where that struck me is that's also what you need to do with your daily and weekly and monthly and quarterly work is evaluate it and prioritize it. Because we're always going to be busy, I think all of us fall into this trap. Like Tommy, you were just talking about the dumb rabbit hole that you went down. The dumb rabbit hole we all deal with, I think, is email. It's distractions in the day. And even if you have something like you have an idea of the things you want to accomplish, you can be derailed for half your day every day with email. So, like, in terms of scaling up, I
I
think
see.
one of the first things that I recommend is always have a clear idea of what you want to accomplish within a week, or call it a sprint, 2 week, or whatever the case may be, and have like the big thing or one big overriding, concept or project or whatever that you're going to accomplish in those 2 weeks. And I do that by creating lists. I have a OneNote list. I stole it off Buck Woody. Has a great blog from many years ago of how he manages just a day-to-day task tracker in OneNote, and I took a version of that, and that's what I use because it's the only way I can actually accomplish something is by having lists, going through a process of prioritization, reprioritization, and evaluating that on a cadence that lets me hit my longer term goals and not get distracted or push back some of those distractions into a bucket that waits longer for my attention. I think that's one of the key things people need to introduce into their work lives if they don't have it is that concept of having, short, medium, long term strategic goals. And one of those being like, hey, if you want to start adopting, being a driver for adoption of Power BI within your organization, well, then your monthly goal should be like, okay, I'm starting from scratch. What are the first key things I need to do? I need to get some, buy-in, right? How do I go about doing that? This week, I'm going to schedule a meeting with, this executive. Then I'm going to show him this report in the second week. And then I'm going to follow up in the third week. Like there's a plan, there's a strategy behind those things as opposed to just getting overwhelmed with all of the stuff that you have to do on a daily basis to do your job, but also like trying to figure out how do you navigate some of those larger impactful areas that you can be, whether that's learning a new thing, but more ideally in terms of scaling up, typically that's making a bigger impact on the organization whereby other people see that you're making a big impact.
So I want to introduce here, and I, I remember you talking about the Buck Woody thing in the past, and that's something I need to revisit because that's a huge thing. I think that's like a fundamental part. But I want to introduce to the conversation. Obviously, there's the being able to do your task list and being able to do the work you need to do. But for someone who's also now wanting to introduce the adoption and the governance side to it, when either they may not have the skill set or they may not have that experience yet, right? Or the company may not have that experience and they're going to be tasked with that. I think that's a little different now where how do you actually automate what you're doing in Power BI, but now having to learn and both now introduce the company to the whole soft skills of governance and adoption. I think it's a little different.
Yeah, but that's to me that's a different topic, right? Like
That's skills.
how do I scale
But
up?
it's not just
Right?
skill.
There's a difference between how do I scale up and start to um, introduce impactful ideas or potentially move in a different direction within the company. There's a threshold here that if you start to get buy-in, right?
Mhm.
First thing, executive sponsor.
Yeah.
If that executive sponsor is like, that's a great idea. I would love for you to drive the adoption and all of these things. Then that part of that conversation is fantastic. In order for us to do that, we need somebody to backfill my role
Mhm.
or at least come in at half capacity so I can start spending time in that area. Because none of scaling up should mean you're assuming more responsibility like on top of the workload you already have. Like you can't, right? You have, you have a limited number of hours in a day. But driving things is different than complete ownership, unless the organization shifts behind you with that. At least that's my opinion.
I'll push back a little, not slightly, not necessarily 100% on this, because yes, like, and I've been in that experience too, where you might have been tasked with the adoption side, but you're dealing with 18 projects. It is impossible. There's no way you'd have time in the day. But the only thing I want to at least push back on is to kind of start that process where you need to see the company do things better. It's going to be better for you, and it's going to be better for the organization as a whole. I think you're right. It kind of does start with at least introducing some ideas, and part of that plan, that on your daily plan, is to come with, call it quick wins, or call it like little low-hanging fruit to show the benefits of it, but devoting time to having to sell that. And it's going to be a little extracurricular. It's not going to be part of your normal job, where, like, from the adoption point of view, we're going to say, here, if we did things this way, this is what I could benefit. Where I think you have to devote some project planning to that, but that's going to be kind of outside of your normal job in
You need
order to get
buy-in
to that
for all
point.
of that. You need buy-in for all of that, and you shouldn't be doing this in a vacuum anyway.
Yeah, but you're
gonna
not.
start doing
I'm not going to. I'm not going to trust some C-level to say, you know what, we need adoption. If you think the company does, or they need
Dude,
governance,
if you have a C-level saying we need adoption, I'm all supporting that nugget. Like,
but that doesn't
if they're
happen.
telling me
That's
that
what
we
I'm
need it,
saying.
what's what I'm saying? Like,
Right? Yeah.
we
If they
support
say
it.
it, then it's easy. But what I'm saying, if you're trying to get the company to really buy into, there's a better way to do this. Where, again, he's saying, I'm the one BI developer here. We need a better process around this. There is something, like, to me, it starts with you taking that initiative. That's going to be a little after hours to put something together.
There's 100%.
Sure, that extra, that the effort of you putting together new ideas and wanting to make your organization better, like, that, part of that is communication, right? Part of that is talking to your manager about this,
Mhm.
going up through the proper chains, because you can't do this in a silo. Like, if there's some thought that you're like the lone Power BI developer and you're going to go into the C-suite, skipping
Sure.
through a whole bunch of folks to just be like, I have this great idea and it's transformational for the business, they're going to be like,
Who are you? Go
right?
away.
But it's not just an idea, though.
You gotta build it up. You gotta show the value, tie it to the things the organization's already trying to
Right.
do.
So here,
Right? And that's the sweet spot, is if you can tie a lot of your efforts of why it's important to
Yes.
company objectives and outcomes
Yep.
already, then you have that first huge step in, because you basically start pitching that along that theme.
So there's a number. I think what you're saying there, Seth, makes a lot of sense. And what also drives a lot of traction here is having physical things that you've done that you can point your finger at that says this is working and here's why. So there's like a metrics portion of this. There's data that you can bring to this conversation that makes people feel confident that you are coming up with good ideas and they're being utilized. And I'm going to rattle off a couple ideas here that you guys have been talking that I think are very relevant around scaling yourself. Okay, so you were talking earlier, Seth, about emails, and Matthew Roach has this phrase, to be the path of maximum resistance. He says, I want you to be the path of maximum resistance. People will email you and ask for your time and ask for your opinion and ask for you to build XYZ things, and you have to not answer those questions. You have to take those questions, bundle them up, and this is how I started Power BI Tips. I started by taking all these questions and bundling them up and putting them on a public forum. It doesn't have to be public for your company. It could be internal or external boards. It could be a Confluence page. It could be a SharePoint page. Take the questions you're getting, write up information about said questions. Here's the knowledge you need, and then share that link. Because when you get the email the second time for that information, or the third time, you're not answering the question anymore. So if it took you an hour and a half to write that first email, you're done. Or if it took you a little extra, maybe it took you 30 minutes and it took you 45 minutes. Great. Well, now that you've written it once, every other person in your company can research and go find or search that information and go find where it is. So, I've even done this with internal teams, like a team of just inside of the department where we had a singular OneNote notebook. I'd take all my notes there and I would point people to pages in the notebook. Here's a link. go find this. Here's the information. And with Teams, it makes it really easy to make a knowledge repository inside a Teams environment. So I think that's something that's very valuable there. Write your answers down in a place where more than one person can consume it. Another way I would say you could scale your time is what I quickly learned is, and I'm going through this right now in my company, I have the knowledge up here to do what I want to do. I know in my head how to build reports the way I want to, how to make them styled, how to build the models, and how to deploy them. So I have to get this knowledge out to my team. So a lot of what I do now is like office hours, right? If someone's having an issue, we sit down, we work out what that is together, one-on-one. It's like peer programming to some degree, spending time with someone else. And if you're in a company culture where everyone comes to you and expects you to do everything, I think that's not going to be a successful pattern, right? If the IT, the BI group has to do all the report building, all the everythings, that's not going to fit. At some level, you have to start educating the broader part of the audience that's consuming data in your company that they've got to be able to do other things. So training other people, teaching them simple things that you know how to do, documenting those simple things and putting them into, again, that same knowledge library, putting down training sessions there, recording office hours, and then letting those videos go out to a public forum, again, in your company that people can go reference and listen to. And you have topical videos around what people need to learn. I think that becomes very much more capable. And now you don't have to keep teaching every single person. You can start referring them to some of the training and the information that you've already developed for somebody else. So I'll just pause right there for a minute. I know I said a lot around those two things, not building knowledge centers and building office hours, or power hours as I like to call them. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's obviously super successful. You look at the community, right?
Yeah.
Like when I started in Power BI,
totally.
Like for 3 years straight, I put all of my knowledge into that forum.
Yep.
And it was funny because we just had a meeting where with my group, somebody they were kind of making fun of me because I'm such a nerd in the community, and they were like, I'm still on there every day, and like Seth is like answering a ton of my questions. It's like I'm almost here, but like that goes to the point.
Yeah.
That's years ago.
Yeah.
And the value is
long-term value.
Yeah. Like everybody can go to a searchable repository where you've answered a question that is solving their problem today, and without having to consistently do that.
Exactly. Well, and people can Google your answers, Seth, that you've made to some of these questions. So people has the question, it's been documented, Seth's been able to answer them. And so now, like, that lasting question that you've answered has now lasted, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. And you look at how many page views are on some of these things, you're looking at like thousands, if not tens of thousands of page views across some of these topical areas. So that's 10,000 requests served through that single answer. And that's huge. That's how you scale yourself. You scale yourself by sharing what you know.
So I'm going to make the argument here that if you don't have the skill, it's very hard to scale. And I think like everything we're saying is great, but you still have to know how to do it, right?
Okay. So I have 2 more points that I was going to make.
Okay.
I didn't make them, but I think this speaks to your next point, Tommy. Like, okay, so where do you get these skills from? Right. So I had another thing I wrote down it's called educate yourself.
Great segue.
So I think educating yourself is an important part of this. And this is like what Seth did, right? Seth, you'd go out to the forums, you'd find questions people were asking, think, I might be able to answer that. And you'd go do a little more digging or a little research and figure out all the permutations of the question and come up with what you think is the right answer. I mean, you spent time learning what you needed to learn in order to answer some of these questions. And eventually you got to a point where you didn't even need to go look at the stuff. You in your mind could go, go to the admin portal, go to this setting, click this thing, boom, 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 done, done, done. So you get to a point where
one of the best ways to learn was going to the forum.
Yep.
And fielding questions that I didn't know the answer to.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. Because what it does is, like, if you think about how do you learn things? Well, you go find information, you go test that in an environment, and we're huge proponents of go do the thing.
Yep.
And then
totally.
it reinforces like, oh, well, this is how this works. And then as you're doing it, that's where all the nuance comes in, right?
Correct.
You can read all the documentation, but unless you go through the actual steps, like you won't know the list of 10 things that don't really work the way you think that they do, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that's why you test.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, 100%.
So I'd also echo in this educate yourself too. Go find people who have done what you've done or are doing what you want to go do. You need to go work with those people, buddy up with them, talk to them, learn from them. Because I have learned, especially as a business owner, like a lot of this stuff is new to me. Paying people, payroll, salaries, taxes, HR. There's a whole bunch of things I had to learn because I was an employee and now I'm running my own company. So with that comes a lot of learning. But you quickly learn. I don't know everything about taxes. Therefore, I go find someone who's an expert in that, and I talk to them about what they know. It's their job to kind of inform me of what I need to know about that certain area. And it goes with Power BI. If you've never done premium, you've never done deployment pipelines, go find people in the community who are already doing it, or go watch videos of people explaining it and how it works and what they're doing with it. So like there's a lot of people very willing to share a lot of knowledge about what they've built and how they've built it. Go get involved in forums and communities of people who've already doing or building what you want to build. So if you want to play in SQL DBA spaces connecting to Power BI, go find those people in the community. I know they're out there. You just got to go hunt for them. So it's going to be kind of a little bit of research for you to figure out how to do that. And then Tommy, to your point around like, hey, how do we grow up our organization? Read all the documentation you can on the adoption roadmap and the implementation roadmap, because those two things are put out by Microsoft, and that consolidates thousands, hundreds, I don't know, lots of data across many big corporations that are finding success with Power BI. These are their best learning practices, and it's from the experts teaching you, hey, evaluate where you're at in this maturity mode, with your executive sponsor. What are you doing with them today currently? Where are you at now, and where do you think you want to be? It gives you how to get to these different steps. So I think a lot of that stuff also is like, you have to do some level of educating yourself and going to dig into it. It's just not going to happen.
So yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to my at least original argument where you have to put some plan on what level of competence you want some of the skills. To your point on if there's a level of competence around DAX that you can have where you can, in a sense, begin to, I don't want to say automate it, but really scale up or scale out where you know what to do, or you can either help people when you get more requests, and it's a lot quicker because you have that level. You're not doing as much research.
But I would argue that I don't want to be quicker. I want you to do it yourself. Honestly,
yeah, but that's not,
you know what I mean?
Not
like
everyone's situation though. And I think especially when you're the single developer, there is a long road to getting other people to start writing DAX when you're the single developer.
Well, then, if you're going to be the only developer ever writing any kind of DAX in your company, right? I mean, you've got to start. I mean, other people are going to have to start building their own models. I mean, our world of Power BI is going to change here very shortly. When Microsoft Power BI starts getting deployed with Microsoft Office, there's going to be a whole bunch more people who are going to have access to Power BI just by default, and stuff's going to happen. And there's going to be things that are going to be built that's going to be really bad. I'm anticipating like a whole bunch of more problems coming with this thing. I do like the idea. Don't get me wrong. I think this is a good thing that's coming. However, I do see, Tommy, to this point, like anyone can start getting that data now. Anyone can start moving stuff around with this data, with this new tool that's now just being handed to them. Where previously they had to be given a license to go and play with PowerBI.com. That's, to me, that's a bit like scary now. So like you're going to have a whole bunch of people. So you just got to start educating. And another thing I'll throw out here too, if you're going to be a better DAX person, you better stink and learn how to do tablet editor, and you better start learning how to script measures and automate. Like again,
like it depends on where you want your efficiencies though, right?
Right.
If we're talking about how do you scale, like, is that because you want to become a better developer, right? You want to perform your tasks faster. That is a completely different focus area, at least initially, to hone some skills so that you can accomplish that thing, which should also be tied to like an improvement plan or something where you're going to benefit from that, or the organization knows you're going to do it, versus, okay, you have a laundry list of tasks, you're a developer, you see a bigger picture within the organization where you've identified some key areas that the company could use this knowledge that you have, and you're going to start leaning into there because that's a real big area of interest for you. Then you're going to spend a ton of time with the adoption roadmap and the documentation that's provided out there to start to build a framework around your specific use case, which is your company, and how you would leverage, or what are the steps you would take to make a better data culture. right? And that is a completely different pursuit
Yeah.
that likely pulls you away from just a developer role if that's what you want, where you wanted to go.
And I think so. Two things on that. I think one, you have to make that conscious decision if you really want to start doing that. Where that's not something you go into with like, we'll do some adoption. I think you really need to start. If you're gonna want to do that, you have to make that decision consciously. And then two, there's a start writing. Like obviously start reading the adoption stuff, but this is one of those things where you're gonna have to have that experience too. And there's not a lot of people who can just give you that experience.
That's why you got to
I
go
have,
seek them.
yeah.
That's why you got to go seek them out. Like, I mean, that's one of the
Well,
reasons
no,
why I
but
highly
what,
recommend
yeah,
Melissa's class, right?
yeah,
Melissa's class is filled with people who are automatically like, not only is the class good for like you learn what she's teaching you, but it's
right,
also good for you're with a whole bunch of other administrators of Power BI, and you're going to form relationships with other people across industries and say,
yeah,
hey, I mean, I was talking to one of the guys from one of my clients. He said, hey, I went to someone's training class. I met another individual in another part of the world that I connected with, and we had questions, and we've now left the class, and now they're still communicating almost monthly about, hey, what's going on in your environment? What's happening in my environment? What are you learning? What are you learning? And there's now this mutual building up. And again, it's finding those experts in those areas. You've got to put yourself in places. If you want to do adoption, you got to go find other people who are doing adoption and spend time with them. That may be investing in a course that you spend time around other people who are doing the same things you are.
well, part of it, and I completely agree. We live in a world now too where there is actually community and actually official courses now around the adoption, where that's phenomenal, and you should definitely seek it out. One thing I would want to add to that is start writing in your own repository, whether it's your own SharePoint or
Yeah, totally agree.
Confluence, of
Build-
what you would want it to do. I have so many documents, and I've had so many documents in the past that never saw the light of day, whether because it was not the right time for it or the company was moving in a different direction. But it was how things would work, what the process would be. Because part of this too is, yes, you have to think from that governance side, but you're also kind of being project manager. They're not going to say, you know what, that's great, we'll get a project manager on this. Usually you're kind of driving it too. So I just, to me, I would just start writing down what you want this to look like and how it would look like. And either there's may a time that it does see the light of the day, but you actually have that experience writing down what it's going to look like. And I think that's a huge part of that. And to your earlier point about you had that repository for like BI knowledge or how to do something. I think this is in that same vein.
And there's also, I mean, Microsoft also, again, I'll put links in the chat description for this stuff so you can go see this one. There's also a lot of good white papers. There's actually a number of like, there's a security overview, there's an enterprise overview, there's Power BI Premium, distributing Power BI externally using Azure Active Directory. Like there's a whole bunch of white papers that are talking about detailed experiences around things your organization may want to be putting in place. And so I honestly really like the SharePoint or Confluence paging of bringing content together. And if you do it, if you can, definitely track how many people from your company are using it, because this is a tool that you can go back to your manager or boss and say, look, I've built this thing on my own, do with my own time, and look at how many people are consuming content from this regularly. We need to scale this up. We need to do more of this. And I think that just helps, I don't know how many people adhere to this, but I kind of subscribe to this idea that when you work in a company, you're building a personal brand. There is a Michael shows up. There's a Mike Carlo brand that goes with me when I show up to meetings or when I'm working with other people in a company. And if I build a brand that people enjoy working with and know that, hey, Mike gets stuff done, or Mike knows a lot of things about these areas, what happens is that brand, what you're building into people's minds, they come back to you or they refer you to other people who are having similar problems. And you become that go-to person for these kind of expertise in areas. So if you want to move up in the company, more strategic thinking, I think you've got to put places around where your strategic thinking is being placed in a company, because then other people can observe it and then, oh yeah, that is working. I can see it's working. We have numbers to track it. And that helps out your story.
I think the phrase, and I'm pretty sure you coined, right? Are we saving money or making money?
Totally.
Is a perfect
That's
way
our phrase.
to
Yep.
to refine your work image,
Yeah.
right? Like if you start to represent yourself in such a way that you're keeping those things in mind, like I wouldn't even say keeping them. When you start to articulate to a manager or boss that you're thinking about these things, like your day to day relate to one of those things, I guarantee you all like instantly their view of you will change.
Yeah.
You have to back that up though. And I think one of the key points I make is only commit to the things that you can accomplish, especially when you're throwing out new ideas, right? Or wanting to take different directions. Like have a clear idea of like what it is you're presenting, the benefit to the company, but don't like say, yeah, I'm going to totally do this and then just have them
Never do it.
assume you're
Right.
adding 25 more percent of your time into something that you don't have time to do. And
Correct.
that's why I said earlier, like if it starts to branch out and they want you to start doing that, there's a role shift there, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I like building your persona at work, like is one of the I think most strategic things you can do, and this definitely helps you along that vein.
Mm.
Um, is some of the things that you were mentioning too.
Well, I'll take a step back too, and I think how you scale yourself, it's to your point, this saving money, making money, but really start with that. What is the objective going to be? Like if you're going to do adoption, you don't just say we're going to do a governance program. I think it starts with you hear the problems like, hey, I know you see there's not a lot
Mm,
of trust in the data.
I like that.
Well, here's a little thing we can do there. You don't have to start with a grandiose. So we're going to have the center of excellence and the office hours and all this stuff because that's not realistic. But you hear the problems, and part of this always goes back to empathy. You're listening, and how do you address that one particular item where you hear that struggle, and I'm going to address it this way. It will take me this long, and
But
then
that's why it's so different per company because each company is at a different point or struggles with different things, and your immediate focus is probably going to be different
sure,
sometimes of
yeah,
how you roll
no,
things
yeah,
out. But to have an overall strategy like that, we are provided essentially the framework of just
right,
the cohesive ideas tied together of all of the organizational pieces that when in play would serve up and enhance the data culture within an organization. Like that's a wealth of information.
yeah,
Mike's
and
to Mike's point, you can cheat code your way
Mhm.
significantly into there by taking
Mhm.
courses like Melissa Coates. Like that's the difference I think I've learned over the years is um, I've had to take a step back of like, well, I can learn it myself. Obviously, yeah, you can find as much information on the internet as possible that
Correct.
will allow you to easily consume, like I should say, consume the information in such a way that you would learn it on your own.
Mhm.
The value of something like a Melissa Coates class is you take what, a weekend, 2 days, and you just bought 3 months of your time, right?
Correct.
Like
Yep.
that the value is the condensation of all of these thoughts and ideas and how
Yes.
to
It's
probably
condensed. Mhm.
strategically implement in certain scenarios that she's brilliant at, right?
And
yeah,
and it's not only just her,
It's a time
it's
thing.
everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
you may not have been working with the deployment pipelines, but someone else in the class has, and you discuss that together. Hey, you may not be thinking about all these different KPIs that measure success for your department, but there's someone else in the class who has, or has done some things, or has, hey, I implemented this thing. And so the idea is it's this mutual learning that occurs between experts in an area. And like that's invaluable. If you can find other
mm,
people on a Slack channel or a Teams channel that are like communicating regularly about common challenges around power, dude, that sounds gold. The things I've learned from Greg Baldini and
sure,
have locked away in my mind around DAX, I am happy to know him. But it doesn't happen unless you go seek out those individuals who are being very like follow them on Twitter, follow their blog articles, follow what they're doing because they're teaching from experience, and you can um, learn from their community-based education pieces. And I think
yeah,
that's one of this is one of the areas I feel like is really strong around just Power BI in general, even the data community, Excel, Power BI, the whole thing. There's a lot of really nice people that are just really happy to teach you something or get involved with a user group. go speak at a user group. If you know something, like, get involved with those people there, because there's a lot of other smart people doing the same things I think you want to be doing.
One thing, and honestly, I just talked to someone I told them they should do a Deneb presentation. They built something amazing, and I think that it goes to all
I would
this.
love to see that. I'm
Yeah.
all about
Oh
the
my
Neb right
gosh,
now.
it was
The Neb is
incredible.
on fire. Every
Yeah.
other day I see another comment around the Neb. It is
I know.
like going gangbusters right now, by the way.
For all of this, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to be the one at your company doing it. So I think a big part of this is don't try to solve the whole world at once. I think all of us have had a moment where we realized we knew more than we did. Like, we knew a lot looking back retroactively. And I think if you're going to do going into one of the spheres or try to automate, whether you're going into the Power Platform in your company, adoption, or Azure, don't try to solve it all. Like, we're going to get a data warehouse right away, or, hey, we're going to have an enterprise Power Platform solution. Or I think it's more start, don't try to solve the whole world. Maybe you start with a department for adoption that is already using Power BI. Maybe you already know one single use case for Power Apps, and you kind of start there, building and showcasing it. Let things snowball. And you want to talk about scaling up, is when the demand comes. And I think you don't necessarily sell that with a grandioso plan all the time if people don't know what you're talking about. So I think starting small on projects and showcasing those little things, I think it helps in two ways. One, it shows the value, and then two, you get the experience, because no matter how much skill you get from reading, from conferences, unless you do it, that's when you learn your own way to be a little bit faster at it, and also have that actual skill and being able to scale that.
Yeah, I think about that a very similar vein, right? When I talk about kind of investing in yourself or your area, right? I always bring up Dory, right? Just keep swimming, because I'm not a huge goal setter. Like, the successes I've had are because I just continually do stuff, right? A lot of that rolls into like a learning mentality. Like, Mike and we talked about that when we were interviewing a lot of folks, and you start to you're looking for folks who are trying to learn things, and there are ways in which we've talked about learning, like successful learning, right? Short, medium, long-term growth kind of plans. And this scaling conversation kind of falls into that as well. But in terms of that, like, that's where I lean into, like, leverage the organizational resources that you have, right?
Yes.
In doing things, right? You could always spin up your own stuff, but like, you shouldn't. If you're investing in the company because you want to see it succeed,
they should invest in you too. It should go both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, this is a relationship, right?
Yes.
If you're strengthening your side of what you're bringing to the table,
I like
there
that.
needs to be an equilibrium at some point as well. But it also points out that if you have that drive and you have that learning mentality, and you're trying to do these things in the organization, and everybody locks you out, then go find a place that is going to allow you.
I was going to say that. Yeah, this might not be the organization for you. Either you wait it out, and the headwinds of leadership change, and something is different and then you get access, or you start looking for a place that actually does let you, because people do want that. Right. There are organizations that need people who are willing to learn, get their hands dirty, and get stuff done.
Right.
And the benefit of continual growth and learning is, wherever you're at, if you're continually pursuing and enhancing your skill set, that just makes the next conversation much easier, right? So, yeah, good conversation.
Let's do some final thoughts here. We're getting close on time here. This has been a really good conversation. I'm really liking this one. This was a very open-ended question. We were able to take a lot of different places. Let's just go around the horn and just do kind of one of your final thoughts. What would be your final nugget, word of advice on this one? What, Tommy, works best for you? What would you say would be your one word of advice?
just keep swimming. Honestly, I think that's a perfect way to put it.
You just stole Seth.
Did I tell you? You already said it.
See, what's funny, what I find funny is I do my closer, and then Mike's like, let's do a closer.
That's
it, man. That's all I got.
That's it. That was the end. One more thing, Seth. One more thing.
Well, I'll rephrase then. Don't solve the world all at once.
Okay, I like that one. Seth, yours is just keep swimming, I would assume.
Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. I'm gonna go after. I'm trying to figure if I want to use my phrase or not. Yeah, I'm gonna use my phrase.
Of course,
If this report isn't making you money or saving you money, you shouldn't be working on it. So like, be strategic about what you're doing. And if I had to throw one extra one in there, I'd maybe say automate. Think about what you're doing and get rid of manual work as much as you possibly can, because that helps you scale as well. It hopefully will free up more time. So with that, we really appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. Hope this was another good episode talking about just career pathing. This is a bit more about around the people side. This is really good. So hopefully you were able to glean some insight from this. We will have many more conversations like this. If you found this was enjoyable and you liked our phrases or our little meme-friendly wordings here, we'd love to see some of those. But if you don't mind, share on the internet what you like about the podcast. If you just give someone else a heads up, hey, this was good. I learned something from it. It was an engaging conversation, and just share it with somebody else. That's all we really ask for here, is to share the word about the podcast to somebody else. Tommy, where else can you hear about or listen to the podcast?
I mean, in a span of a week, you're going to get deployment pipelines, data marts, your career, and then the data application experiences.
Boom.
How good?
What more do you need?
What more do you need? Just like Mike said, share the word. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the things. We're going to be on Facebook probably eventually.
We are on Facebook, actually.
Oh, we are?
Well, with the video part, yes. Yeah, we are.
Okay.
We streamed it with Facebook as well.
So just share the word and just subscribe.
Awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you on Thursday.